Lesson 22 The Homo Bodhisattvus method or the four paramitas or the conditions of Buddhahood or virtuous Bodhic square. Conversion to the Soka Gakkai, faith, practice, study. Homo is a Latin word meaning human. Bodhisattvus is a Latinized form of Bodhisattva. The Homo Bodhisattvus method is therefore the method internalized by the Bodhisattvas in the path towards Buddhahood. The Homo Bodhisattvus method is analyzed in conversion to the Soka Gakkai, faith, practice, study. Conversion to the Soka Gakkai, the first paramita conversion, to the Soka Gakkai, the organization in charge of the worldwide kosen-rufu movement, is the first paradigm of this method. In the Gassho and generally in Buddhist teachings, faith is presented as the first element in the path towards wisdom. Otherwise, very often, at least always, the framework in which this faith must evolve is ignored. For example, if an athlete evolves in a bad environment, absence of dietary follow-up, technical supervision and faculty management, he will never perform. It is the same with Buddhism. If the Buddhist is a follower of a bad teaching, whatever the degree of his faith, he will never become a Buddha. In this so-called troweled era of Mappo, the Soka Gakkai is the only religion that magnifies the Lotus Sutra, therefore there can be no bodhidharma outside of the Soka Gakkai. So the Soka Gakkai is the first of the four paradigms that make up the Homo Bodhisattvus. Faith. The second paradigm, belief, is in itself enlightenment. When it comes to faith, let us hear the Daishonin instruct us. Belief or faith is in itself enlightenment. Faith is belief in the Lotus Sutra, belief that Nam-myoho Renge materialized by the Gohonzon of the three great esoteric laws, all three protected by the Soka Gakkai itself, an integral part of the three great esoteric laws and the three treasures of Buddhism, opens up a better quality of life for us which leads to bodhidharma. In the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, Hokekyo Daimoku Sho, Nichiren Daishonin writes, and we read in the Nirvana Sutra professed in the Grove Sala the last days of his life, although there are innumerable practices which leads to enlightenment, if one teaches faith it induces all these practices. So faith is the fundamental requirement on the path of the Buddha. Of the practice of the Bodhisattva, the first 10 relating to faith are essential, and the practice of these 10 stages consists in awakening a pure faith. In the Keimoku Sho, the eye-opening treatise, the Daishonin writes, I and my disciples are plagued by all kinds of difficulties, but if our hearts know no doubt, we will attain Buddhahood. Do not doubt simply because heaven does not grant us its protection. Don't be discouraged because you don't taste an easy and peaceful existence in this life. This is what I taught my disciples morning and evening, and yet they begin to doubt and forsake their faith. It is the nature of fools to forget the promises made when the crucial moment comes. Practice. The third condition of Buddhahood. Buddhism practice has not always been uniform. Over the centuries it has varied. The practice of pre-Shoho era, a practice of aristocrats, from the Greek Aristoteles, the best. The practice of pre-Shoho era, period before the Buddha's advent, had three characteristics: an elitist and solitary practice before the advent of the Buddha. Buddha's practice was elitist because reserved for a small group, almost exclusively men. Practice was a solitary practice. The practicing monks fled from society, isolated themselves in their quest for spirituality. An austere practice, the practice of austerities, that is to say the sufferings that practitioners inflicted on themselves. Examples: Fugen burnt his elbow, Sezen Doji threw himself into food for the demon, Jade sold his flesh and his blood. The attainment of bodhidharma extended over several lives, a practice spanning several lifetimes. The practice of Shoho era. The practice of Shoho era, the true era of the veritable societal practice, presents three major features. A non-elitist and inclusive practice. With regard to his teachings, the Buddha decided that the truth was in the middle way. Structurally, the Buddha created a new form of social organization, the Sangha, a community of men, women, nuns, monks. A non-austere practice. Buddha's practice was a practice which excluded any suffering inflicted on one's body. The laity carried out their activities normally. Monks and nuns were in contact with society. At this glance they did not isolate themselves. The Buddha Shakyamuni had not yet come into this world. The Lotus Sutra had not yet been taught. The attainment of Buddhahood extended over several lives. Meditation was the main defining features of Buddhism. Meditation, samadhi, in Sanskrit, which was preceded by a certain technique. Daisonic practice in the troubled era of Mappo, Nichiren Daishonin established a new method of Buddhist practice in the 13th century confirmed by Nichiren Shonin in the 18th century. The Buddhist practice established by the Daishonin following the invocation on April 28, 1253 of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and the transcription on October 12, 1279 of the Daigohonzon, the Daishonin established for the 10,000 years and more a new Buddhist practice. This is called Gongyo, continuous practice, in Japanese. The Daisonic practice consists of the recitation of both chapters 2 Hoben, opportune means and 16, Juryo, the Buddha's lifespan, preceded and followed by Daimoku. The confirmation of Nichiren Shonin, the 26th administrator of the Nichiren Shoshu and the most learned in the 18th century confirmed the Daisonic prescriptions analyzed in Gongyo Stricto Sensu and Invocation of Daimoku. The invocation of Daimoku, the practice Lato Sensu, in the broad sense Gongyo is a twice-daily practice, morning and evening, consisting of the reading of chapters, Hoben, 2 and Juryo 16 of the Lotus Sutra facing the Gohonzon accompanied by a recitation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The invocation of Daimoku, the practice Stricto Sensu, in the strict sense this variety of practice consists of reciting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo apart from the recitation of Hoben and Juryo chapters of the Lotus Sutra facing the Gohonzon provided it is not the opportunity of the commission of bad acts. Study, the fourth and last paradigm in order of importance, study comes in fourth position. Study is defined as cognitive activity, that is to say an intellectual activity at the end of which knowledge is acquired. To attain bodhidharma one should not be satisfied only with the Buddhist aspects of study, it is also necessary to study secular things. Buddhist study is the study of Buddhist texts and treatises. This study mainly concerns the Lotus Sutra and the Gosho without excluding other sutras and Buddhist writings. Secular things constitute in themselves even Buddhism, says the Daishonin in the Gosho. That is to say in reality all studies come under Buddhism. The interest of Buddhist study without study there can be bodhidharma. Since there can be no Buddha who does not know who he is, his nature which is sui generis, one of a kind. Buddhahood cannot be considered without study since when the 4 demons and the 3 obstacles, Sanshoshima, in Japanese or difficulties arise, the practitioners abandon practice. The attainment of bodhidharma is inseparable from troubles say the sutras on the one hand and the other there could not be a Buddha who would prosper in a world which is undermined by plagues such as global warming, terrorism, pandemics, lack of democracy and of respect for human rights, famine, wars and so on and of which he would be ignorant. Moreover, could he lead others if he ignores all their problems? This is to say the important nature of study in Buddhism.